Behind me sits the Volvo S90 T6 Inscription all-wheel drive. And over the course of driving this vehicle, I've had plenty of comments, some stereotypical, saying, looks like I'm the target demographic for driving this. Although I disagree, I think getting behind the wheel of this has given me an immediate job title upgrade. I feel like I am now the VP of something, or the senior director, or maybe even a president. In that vein, I think that's exactly what Volvo was trying to do here. They are trying to exude a business class presence, interior and exterior. They didn't have to resort to over-stylizing anything here to make it work, to make it feel and look luxurious. And that's just the thing. Not everyone wants some absurd look-at-me type vehicle. And this is so understated. Now, some are going to say, yes, it's way too vanilla, very boring looking. And on a day like today, where you have a mix between blues and grays, this color just kind of blends in with the environment. It just doesn't stand out. And that's partially its charm and one of the negative attributes. Now, if you've optioned it, on your little key fob here, coated in the same color wood that's in the car, it has an electronic trunk release, which means it will open it and close it for you. Now, whether you need that or not is something else, but they seem to have designed this trunk to have an extremely good depth. You could probably fit 4 golf bags lengthwise in here. That's probably what you're going to be looking to do. With the seats folded down, it is very deep. I could probably fit a hot dog cart in here, a couple other things I won't mention, but the disappointment about it is the width. I can't fit my 42-inch slider in here width-wise without it being on an angle. And there's a lot of cars, even compact cars, I can do that. So I think they had to sacrifice some things in here, maybe for the fact that the hinges are kind of hidden. That's one thing to look at, but I'm pretty sure for most people using this, it's going to be a non-issue. Now, I can yammer on about the exterior of this vehicle all day. It's subjective. I don't really have to know anything. But one thing you can't do usually is take a look at the underbody, which is why we're going to head to the shop to talk to Scott Turbowski, where he is eagerly foaming at the mouth with his greasy little mitts, and he wants to rub them all over it. Scott, it's good to be back in the shop, isn't it?
No, I'm here every day.
Oh, true. So I guess it's good for me to be back in here because we are looking at a prime specimen. You know what they call the S90? This is called the executive class vehicle. So
does the passenger front seat go all the way forward so the guy can sit back there with his legs extended for when the chauffeur drives it?
No, you got to go at about another $50,000 more expensive to get those premium features.
Does it have bulletproof windows?
No. So it's not executive for you.
No.
Is that what you need?
I need a fax machine in the back and a VCR.
Let's talk about what we have here, Scott. We have a Swedish Volvo with a Japanese transmission and some parts that come from Germany, but this is completely assembled in Sweden. Much like the XC90 we looked at, there's a lot of carryover here. One of the biggest things, aluminum galore in the front end and double wishbone suspension. Larger brakes, but essentially this is what you start to see in the luxury car range that's not some nerfish, compromised setup. And one of the beauties of it, it rides extremely supple, rides very well. In the front, like typical cars of all types, you have to remove this to get to your maintenance items, which of course is not going to matter to the owners of this car because it's going to be a dealer machine. And other than that, really, it looks fairly plain Jane. It's covered up underneath. There's attempts at aerodynamics to flow air under here smoothly. Now, there's no air suspension on the front, Scott, but it does have adjustable dampers. So it will firm up based on your drive modes. Looks like you found your way to the rear like you always do. We have a drive shaft here, Scott, and this is what they call AWD. What does that stand for?
Oh, something.
Yeah, it's all-wheel drive.
Oh.
So this is an on-demand system. There's no center differential. So the computer decides when to send the power to the back And this is an extremely neutral driving experience. Typically in luxury cars, you get rear-wheel drive, and then people get the phobia of driving that in the winter because they don't want to swap tires. This has some kind of pseudo summer tires on it, these Michelin Pilots, and I had zero issue with any type of traction loss at all, ever, even in the cold, some of the icy conditions and
It hasn't
sleet.
even been cold yet. What are you talking about?
It's
It's been
been cold.
50 degrees the whole time.
No, it was cold when I first got this thing. In the back, you notice this tacked on, looks like a control unit of some type.
It looks a nice place for a floor jack when you get flat tire.
Yeah, just push it right up there.
That'll probably never go bad.
No, never. It's sealed. It's weather sealed, Scott.
Just like on the F-150s, they're weather sealed, and the corrosion gets between that and the frame of the truck, and it just breaks it in half.
That's impossible.
No, it never happens.
No, it never happens. The rear control arms, a lot like we saw in the XC90, they are massive hunks of aluminum. There's an aluminum carrier and hub in the back. This has adjustable dampers, but the interesting part that you pointed out is it has air springs, even though they're not technically springs anymore. They've replaced the springs with air bladders. Scott, you may notice this motor, and I keep saying it, it looks exactly like what's in the XC90, and that's because it is. And the big thing here is you're going to see this over and over again because Volvo, like many companies, have now standardized their engine design. They have two different four-cylinders, technically, a diesel and a turbo or forced induction four-cylinder, which this is the 2-liter. And this 2-liter can be changed and manipulated to give you more and more horsepower, and this is the top trim level. At 320 horsepower and 300 pounds of torque, you get a supercharged and a turbocharged inline 4. It's for efficiency's sake, to save fuel economy, to save cost and development, and they can fit one motor in all their different platforms without having to constantly redevelop. It makes a lot of sense. It's super smart. But again, like we said before, if you're somebody that's coming from Mercedes, BMW, the more luxury monikers,
Buick.
you're going to wonder, why am I paying so much money for a 4-banger? And the reality is with this car compared to the XC90, I said that car feels very sluggish. It was kind of like underwhelming. And I kind of feel bad for the engineers who designed this thing, because they spent so much energy and work to build this thing, to get it to feel like a naturally aspirated motor, to make it smooth, and then to put it in a heavy car where you can't even appreciate it. It's difficult. In this car, it feels a lot different. It really is very quick. It feels like the Lexus 3.5 liter that we see in every car. It has that level of acceleration, smoothness, and it has a strong top end. I like it a lot in here, and I think a lot of people will, if you can get over the fact it still sounds like a 4-cylinder. One of the biggest things about this Volvo is its sense of refinement. There's no urgency here to do anything other than relax. And that's something a lot of cars don't do too well. And a large part of it is the interior cabin. You don't feel stressed out. You feel there's just a sense of peace that you get driving this. Now that's a huge pro for somebody that is looking for that type of ride, for that type of experience. But if you're somebody that's a little bit more edgy, needs to be constantly reminded you're behind the wheel of a car, this might not offer enough drama or stimulation for you. Let's take a look at the way this vehicle kind of handles through some of the more hardcore turns. And this is a heavier vehicle, but with all-wheel drive, it's kind of a different experience, honestly. I mean, you're not going to be tearing up back roads in this car, but you could because of the all-wheel drive system. There's virtually no understeer below the 80% mark. And with the supercharger and the turbocharger on here, you're not wanting for a lot of power. And I think that's one of the biggest things between the S-Class or the S90 versus the XC90, where it has the same exact motor and transmission on the XC90, but you don't feel like there's a lot going on there. In this car, it's totally different. You can tell the weight is down in here. There's a sense of urgency at the bottom to the top, and it does feel like a 3.5 liter V6. That's about the only thing I can compare it to. You're always have power, and it's a really good driving experience. And I think people are going to buy this vehicle for pretty much one primary reason: the interior space. This is leagues better than so many luxury cars in this price. It's so well sorted. The leather, the quality, all the way around is what makes this what it is. You know, driving experience aside, the transmission, the motor, the ride quality, it's supremely quiet. It's so just isolated from the outside world. It's partly to do with the glass, the materials they use to kind of insulate everything from the outside world. And that's partly why it's so comfortable and calm and sedate. Now, with this vehicle, there was a rattle, one very annoying rattle that I found in the ceiling in the headliner that I just had to pound in place. I don't know if it was a clip loose up in the top, but once I hit it a couple times, it hasn't rattled again. And I didn't see that in the XC90, but then again, it had a different headliner material. But that's about the only quality issue I can tell on the interior of this space, and it was quickly resolved. This is a good time to talk about the suspension. It's definitely not as good as the air suspension from a luxury, refined ride, of course. With the traditional dampers and the double wishbone suspension, on extremely choppy pavement, you do feel a little bit of a springiness to it. And that is because it's on the softer side. And I feel like it's pretty well isolated from the road. Partly it could be due to the summer tires, creating a little bit more road noise, a little bit more NVH and vibration into the cabin. But for the most part, it's on par with what you'd expect at the price range for a luxury cabin. On most pavement surfaces, it's 90th percentile. It's not until you get into the really bad stuff that you feel just a little bit of jitteriness here, and it's really not that bad. Oh. Now, much like the XC90, this is where the Volvo earns its money. This, again, is an interior that feels like it was set up and designed by an interior designer that knew what they were doing with very little compromise and cost-cutting efforts. There are some hard plastics here, but they are so hidden and they are so high quality that you don't even notice it. Everything is soft touch, either leather, or surfaces that feel like leather. There's real wood in here. Granted, I don't know if that's going to be your taste, and some of it looks like it's tacked on, namely on the front part of the dashboard, but in the doors it's so carefully and well integrated, it's so hard to complain. The steering wheel design, the center console design, everything is padded. Again, this is one of the best interior designs you're going to find for anything under $100,000, and it makes sense that, of course, Tesla would have poached the interior designer here for their company. One of the mottos of this channel is, to appreciate the good, you have to take a look at the bad. This is not a commercial for any car. And there are some bad things about this interior, and I've covered it before. They've gotten rid of all the HVAC controls, physical controls to kind of clean up the interior. It was part of their interior design, which has moved it all onto the touchscreen. And one of my biggest problems with technology, electronics, and modern cars, and I work in the field and I see it every day, is you sacrifice a lot of functionality for the sake of the wow factor that, like, this touchscreen gives you. And in the case of this car, it's not so much about Volvo, but it's about inconsistency. There's nothing more frustrating to a user than inconsistency. There's days I get in this and it's extremely fast. Get in the car, it loads up quicker than other days. And there's times where I'll be driving for 5 minutes and I'll try to move the screen, change a setting, adjust the temperature, and it's laggy as hell. It's slow to respond. And in a modern age of technology, this has become so commonplace. And the thing is, some people this will be a deal breaker for them, while others may not even pay attention, and it may not be an issue at all. But for me, to have something in here that is this inconsistent between two different models now, is a big problem for me. And namely, when you remove the physical controls for the HVAC away and I have to rely on the touchscreen, I don't think I could live with this. And that's something that you're going to have to get in here and play with, and not just a 5-minute test drive. You're going to have to turn it off and on and just see how the system responds to what you do the most. The next con is some of the storage. It's this beautifully laid out center area and armrest that looks fantastic. But then when I want to use, well, if you have a bigger phone, like a lot of phones are, I can't really find a place to put it. The cup holder area is a little weird. They're kind of shallow. I mean, you can fit a lot of stuff in here. It's just, it doesn't seem the most easiest to use out of the many cars I've been in. However, it makes up for it in the door storage pockets. They're superb. And the armrest is a little small, and that's because they have to shove the CD player in there. They didn't want to clutter up the center console area. Last but not least, and you don't have to get it, but these light colored interiors that have come back that were huge in the 70s, you're starting to see them again in all these luxury cars. And when you have this white or off-white color, and this car barely has any miles, the leather is already stained. The seat is kind of turning black. It looks scummy. It looks dirty. The door area, the places where oils contact, where your body's sitting or touching, it's just darker, and you can notice it right away, and it just kind of taints the overall interior experience, and it's something you're going to have to be aware of. This has a big wow factor again if you're looking at it new, but just keep in mind, you're going to have to do a lot of care, or you may not be able to get some of these stains out of it either. Extending into the positives, which is something rare for me on an interior cabin, it just really does not end all over the place. You have a cooled glove box. You have real stitching. You have craftsmanship in here. It's something that you have to get in to appreciate. The other pros are, and it's something you're going to want to option, is the Bowers & Wilkins system. This is their audio system. It's a high-end audio manufacturer, and now they're doing stuff in cars. And it's not just a pretty-looking grill. If you're using CD audio, which is in your armrest, or an aux connector with a phone like my LG that has a DAC or the HTC, you get just amazingly clean audio that just kind of takes you away to a different place when you're driving this car. It just takes you out of your environment, and it makes it so enjoyable to be in here. Sometimes it's hard to come to a conclusion about a vehicle, either because there's so many negatives, or there's just too much mixed bag with certain cars, or they're just kind of so good or boring that you can't really come up with anything to say. The S90. This is a car that executes on its vision completely. It knows exactly what it wants to be, and it's not trying to be anything else. And for those that are looking for one of the most refined rides, the most comfortable interior experiences, this is it. This thing is priced at about $66,000 or $67,000. And a lot of vehicles, you have to spend almost $80,000 to $90,000 to feel like it's something special on the interior space. There wasn't a day I got out of this where I didn't feel eager to get back on the inside, to enjoy all the attention to detail. And that's where this is a home run. Now, the exterior, the engine options, or lack thereof, might be a deal breaker for some, but I think for most, you're really going to enjoy this.